If you know a thing or two about the S85 V10, then you do know that they don't have an oil dipstick. The way they check their oils through the sensor, the level oil sensor and the temperature sensor, I'm assuming, they use the iDrive system to check the level of the oil and tell the driver how much oil you have in the system. I don't like that. The S85 V10 swapped M3 isn't gonna have an iDrive. Also, relying on a sensor, I don't really like the idea of at all. So we're gonna fabricate an oil dipstick. Here's the beauty. Here's a little bung, here's a little fitting for it, here's a dipstick. It's a little long from what I've been measuring so far, so we're gonna be making adjustments to it. Welcome back to Yev's Builds, dude. And there we have it, boys. She's all welded up. The bung is welded up. Huge shout out to Daniel and Arthur Chank. They're brothers, they're fabricators, they're welders. They're amazing, man. I'm super grateful for this. This is sick. Check them out below. Please do. Give them a shout. Give them a follow. They're dope. They're super cool, man. Before we get going with this, as you can see, there's still a bunch of oil previously from before I even rebuilt the whole V10. It had 5 spun rod bearings, a bunch of shavings in there and whatnot. I'm gonna clean it all out, but before so, I'm gonna fill it up with water, make sure nothing's leaking from this side and whatnot, you know, nothing's leaking from anywhere. Make sure it's holding up water. Obviously with engine pressure, it's gonna be a little bit different. So we won't really know until we fill it up with oil and start up the engine, which is gonna be very soon, by the way. Very, very soon, so stay tuned for that. Dude, this is gonna be possibly the first V10 with an oil dipstick. I don't know, I'm stoked. And moment of truth, kind of messed up during that process. The tube ended up breaking. I had my boy Arthur, whom I introduced a little earlier. He ended up welding the brake for me, but it turns out that the oil dipstick itself wouldn't go through where it was welded. It was a little too rough on the inside, obviously. It needs to be smooth. I ended up getting another tube. We ended up bending that with Arthur. Something didn't go right there, I forget, but I ended up having to get another tube. And it did work out in the very end. You're gonna see this shortly, but in the meantime of us doing all of that, there was a lot of downtime. Just in terms of us, you know, meeting up, and he has a family, he has his own life going on. In the process of that, I ended up making a radiator bracket with Daniel, and check that out. But stay tuned to the very end because we're gonna show you the end result of the dipstick. It worked out. It worked out, I promise you. Okay, so now we got a radiator and we got a giant chunk of aluminum. What are we doing? Making radiator brackets. Making mounts, dude. There you go, dude. Let's go. However, before we get going with all this, we're gonna have to cut into the frame rails a little bit because the E60 M5 original radiator is much wider than the actual frame rails itself. Not a whole lot. We're just gonna have to cut in a little bit into it, make some notches, make some room. We'll weld it up later. But for it to fit and get underneath this whole metal piece right here and get, you know, hidden away and whatnot, we're gonna have to cut it in, weld it up later, make it fit. While the radiator is mocked up a little bit, we just held it up by tape and by the factory radiator hoses from the V10 to the regular factory M5 radiator. Everything's held up, everything's nice and even. Now we're gonna start measuring and we're gonna create a bracket, like a trapezoid shaped bracket from the bottom, go into the frame rails, bolt her up, and the bottom piece should be good, dude. So the idea here now is quite simple. I made a little template. It's gonna be going right about into here on each corner of the radiator, both bottom corners at least. We're gonna take a thick piece of rubber, thickness of this plus extra. That way it's gonna sit and be mounted and it's gonna have a little bit of play regardless from the vibration, right? Before we get bending, we're gonna make these. Similar idea we have for the top as well. You see there's 2 little holes on the center right here.
It just so happens that they almost perfectly line up with the radiator, with these corners of the radiator. We're gonna take a piece of rubber, put it on top of the radiator. I'm gonna get 2 more of these hood latch adjustments, or hood adjustments, right? We're just gonna screw them back in, and it's gonna push down on the radiator and the rubber, and that way this thing's just gonna be seated perfectly and it's not moving anywhere, baby. They're a little funky looking, but they'll do the job. Look at that. That one's already in there. This one, it's gonna go right up in there and sit on that bracket that we're making. And to make it even more secure, we're probably gonna drill a hole through it, drill a bigger hole for a screw to sit in. That way it goes all the way through, and then tighten it with the nut. That way it squishes it even further, and it's gonna be solid, dude. And now that the dipstick is officially done, everything fits, everything mounts up perfectly. We're gonna pull the oil pan off again in order for us to make the proper marks for where's minimum and where's maximum. That way I know for a fact this is gonna be reading oil properly. Let's do it, let's get it going again, dude. She's leveled, the oil pan is off. Now I'm gonna start pouring in quarts of probably water or something. I'll figure it out as we go, but I'm gonna have to fill it up with some sort of fluid in order for the reading on the dipstick to be accurate. If you don't know, these V10s take about, on a full regular oil change, you have to fill it up with about 8.9 quarts of oil, right? So that's just a regular oil change on these V10s. Obviously on a completely dry engine, you're gonna have to pour in more, but in this case, I'm gonna mimic what would be a regular oil change. So I'm gonna fill up the oil pan with about 7.9 quarts, 8, we'll just round it up. I'm gonna pull out the dipstick, and I'm gonna mark the very bare minimum of it, right? Later, I'm gonna fill up 1 more quart, it's gonna make it to 9. I'm gonna pull out the dipstick again and measure the very top of it. That way I know between minimum and maximum, there's 1 quart of oil that needs to be fulfilled, right? So I'm just gonna see if this works, dude. Okay, interestingly enough, 8 quarts is literally barely over this big opening for the oil pump right there. Then there's a second oil pump. Well, it's all one, but there's 1 suction pump here and 1 is deep down in there. So I'm gonna pull this out now, try to see if I can see where the minimum is, and then mark it and go from there, I guess. Dude. Alright, screw it. Water method did not work out whatsoever. Can't read the markings at all. So my boy Daniel brought me some cheap ass oil from O'Reilly's, the cheapest we could get, just for the sake of measuring this purpose. Just for the sake of measuring this purpose. Just for the sake of measuring this. And we're gonna fill it up, see how it goes. We're gonna fill it up with 8, mark it, fill it up with 9, see how that goes. If it's not much is gonna change, then we'll think of something else. But in the meantime, everything's tight. When I was filling up with water, I did notice it didn't have a crush washer, or I didn't tighten the actual oil drain plug on here, so it was spewing from the bottom. Now it's all tight, we can fill her up. Perfect. Moment of truth. Okay, right there. I'll just notch it to see, just to see. Can't really tell on camera here, but 8 quarts is right here. Right there. Yes. There you go. Let me just notch it down. You still can't see it on camera, but I made a notch right there. It's enough to see for now. Stick her back in and pour another quart in, see how that goes. Or more, just to be accurate. Okay, and now that is 9 quarts, which technically is a full oil change on one of these. Let's see if it moved up at all or not. Hey, what do you know, it did. Beautiful. Oh, dude, beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna notch it again to mark it that it's 9. And we have a successful experiment. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a fully functioning oil dipstick on this V10. Nice. Now let's drain all this cheap ass oil, put the oil pan back in officially for the final time. I think we could bolt her up and forget about it. And use this gasket, it's been on my shelf for 4 years. For 4 years, since day one of me getting this engine. It's exciting. And here is the final result. Everything's bolted down, everything's tidied up. We bolted it down to the engine right there, since I have the block-off plates on either side anyway, because if I were to bolt it down to the chassis, any sort of engine movement would fatigue the oil dipstick itself, and it could potentially crack any sort of welding or tubing, whatever. So we bolted it down to the engine, that way it's all nice and secure, it clears everything. The headers are currently off because I gotta get some flanges welded onto those, but in the meantime, True Focus Fab, their package has arrived, and this bash bar looks absolutely stunning. I mean, the craftsmanship on this, the quality is absolutely beautiful, truly. Man, guys at True Focus, I appreciate you guys so much. This is beautiful, truly, this is beautiful. They welded on some tabs on here for bumper quick release mounts. Got those already, whenever I get the bumper, but dude, it's looking good. Even without the bumper, man, this is, this is sexy. This is real good, man. And as I'm sitting here next to the S85, I think this is a good leeway to end the video. If you can't tell, there's not a whole lot left for us to actually start up this engine for the very first time in 4 years. I've never heard this thing run. If you're new to the channel, I rebuilt this full thing here in the garage, pretty much. There's really not a whole lot left. We need to wire up the throttle pedal. I'm waiting for my oil cooler to come in. We're gonna plumb that up. Transmission cooler, plumb that up. Put the headers on after the flanges are welded up for the final time. And there's not really a whole lot left. I know it's easier said than done, but as I'm doing this, as I'm approaching the day of when it started up for the very first time, I'm just finding out little things here and there that I still need to do. So in essence, there's not a whole lot, but just a lot of tedious little things. But yeah, we're getting close. We're getting real close. Appreciate you if you stay this long. And yeah, till the next one, dude. Peace.